Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to CivicSpark's Capstone Poster Symposium. This is the Energy and Waste session. CivicSpark is a national service program of the Local Government Commission. We are a Governor's Initiative AmeriCorps program dedicated to building capacity for government agencies to address emerging environmental and social equity resilience challenges in the state of California. I'm pleased to be hosting today's session. My name is Tim Mock. I'm the regional coordinator of the Greater Los Angeles and San Diego regions, and I'm joined by my co-facilitator, Ashoka Alvarez, who is the regional coordinator of the Bay Area. We are very excited to be here and to be hosting this session for you all. As we're all aware, this is a celebratory time for CivicSpark and our fellows who have worked just so hard on their projects for these past 10.5 months. And this session's goal is to really lift up our fellows who have worked on energy and waste projects, and for us to just learn a little bit more about their work and impact. So thank you all for being here and joining us and supporting our fellows and the program. Just a few logistical details before we jump in here. If you are experiencing any technical challenges, please message Ashoka in the chat box, as I'll be mostly facilitating this session. Each fellow who is presenting today will have between 5 or 6 minutes for each presentation. Each presentation will be followed by a couple minutes for Q&A from our audience here. So we encourage you to unmute yourselves, to ask the questions, or utilize the chat box that Ashoka will be managing. And certainly throughout the conversation, we want to make this interactive, so feel free to use the chat box even during the presentation for kudos, compliments, or questions. We would love to see that just be engaging. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our first presenter, Nasreen Syed, who will be followed then by Tessa Grezdo and Shannon Casey. So I will go ahead and turn it to Nasreen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm a fellow at the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department with their sustainability team. To give you a brief background on my project, so basically in 2016, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors established the Chief Sustainability Office to make Los Angeles communities healthier, more equitable, economically stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable. As of August 2019, the board adopted the Our County Plan, a county-wide sustainability plan. In order to implement the goals from the plan, the Sheriff's Department created the sustainability team. The sustainability team at the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department oversee and administer sustainability projects and programs throughout the department. Examples of their projects include the laundry water recycling and a recycling center at the Pitches Detention Center, inmate jumpsuit recycling, EV charger infrastructure, and EV bus pilots. In their efforts to implement the Our County Plan, one of the goals of the unit is to divert as much waste as possible from landfills and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This aligns with some of the strategies outlined in Goal 9 of the Our County Plan. Consequently, the department must draft and implement resource management plans at all facilities. The resource management plans focus on recycling and alternatives to single-use plastic. While the category of facilities are similar in operation, each facility has unique characteristics based on their site contracts, location, and community. Once the resource managements are implemented, the unit maintains, tracks, and reports waste reduction or increases recycling efforts and supports changes in procedures, vendors, or policies. So basically, some of the outcomes of the project that we've been working on are We were able to conduct 20 waste assessments. The waste assessments involved going into different facilities and evaluating their waste management and sustainability practices. The waste assessments were then used to produce resource management plans for the different facilities, and altogether we produced about 20 resource management plans for different sheriff stations throughout the county. The resource management plans included instructions on where to take recycling and how to properly dispose of common items found in the different facilities. We also gave them advice on how to host more sustainable events, because a lot of times the sheriff stations, they have barbecues and other fundraisers. So we would give them suggestions and tips on how they can make those events more sustainable. We also provided them with goals to accomplish to make their facilities more sustainable. Eventually, all the 20 resource management plans were delivered to the facilities with short presentations on how to use them. As part of the community outreach efforts, we had a beach cleanup in collaboration with the Surfrider Foundation and the LA Fire Department. It was a very successful event. Almost 100 volunteers showed up, and we were able to engage with the communities we serve while also contributing to the betterment of our environment. We were also able to distribute about 44 battery bins for the facilities to properly discard of batteries. As part of the community messaging and training, a short recycling video was produced in collaboration with the video production unit. The team gained a lot of attention with the publication of our articles in the Star News, which is the Sheriff Department's monthly magazine. We published 3 articles in the Star News, and before we knew it, staff from different divisions were reaching out to us for advice on sustainability matters concerning the department. And then finally, we were able to do a cost analysis to demonstrate that the department will be saving money and diverting as many as 30,000 plastic bottles from the landfill each year by switching to tablet-based cleaning products in only 3 of their facilities. I thank you for joining us today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask now, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Great, thanks, Naz. We have some time for a few questions from our audience or comments. Happy to talk about them.
Or you can type them in the chat box.
It looks like we have one question from Julie for you, Naz. She asks, are the resource plans available to share?
I could ask my site supervisor if we are allowed to share them with external viewers. I don't think it should be a problem, but yeah, I can ask and get back to you, Julie, on that.
Great. Another question from Kif coming in. Do you think the plans are relevant to other local governments as the Sheriff's Department is so different?
I mean, a resource management plan can be set up for any department you want it to be. For the Sheriff's Division, we were mostly focusing on getting them to reduce their waste and studying their contracts with different vendors and trying to set them up with a recycling service. If they don't have any recycling service, trying to figure out if they can reduce their trash tonnage and giving them advice. So I think it can be implemented and copied to other settings as well.
Great questions. Any other questions for Nasreen? Okay, thanks, Nasreen. I'm going to turn it over now to Tessa Grezdo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tessa Grezdo, and I'm a Green Building Fellow at the San Francisco Department of the Environment. And a lot of my work that I've been working on throughout the last year had to deal with embodied carbon or operational carbon within buildings. It's important to recognize that the building and construction industry contributes to about 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, So it's really important that we make an effort to help reduce those building emissions from the building sector. So there are two different types of carbon emissions associated with buildings. There's operational carbon, and those are the emissions produced while a building is in use, such as emissions produced from electricity. And there's also embodied carbon. And if you look at this graphic here, it shows that embodied carbon includes all the emissions produced all throughout a building's life cycle, from the beginning stages to when materials are first extracted and transported to the construction site, all the way until the building is removed and those materials are then transported either to a landfill or hopefully a recycling center or a reuse facility. So I worked on quite a few different projects during my time at SF Environment. And some of the projects I worked on for operational carbon is I helped to organize San Francisco's first energy fair, where we had about 300 guests come, 6 different education sessions, about 20 different speakers, and 30 exhibitors. We also had the mayor come and do a live cooking demo, which was really awesome. Also, I helped to participate in the mayor's zero emission building task force, specifically helping with the municipal existing building work group, where I was able to listen in on conversations between representatives from different city departments, where we discussed how we can make current municipal buildings transition them into electric buildings. In addition to that, I worked on a few different projects related to embodied carbon. And unlike operational carbon, we've been seeing a lot of policies about building electrification. Policies around embodied carbon are just emerging. So I was doing a lot of research around this topic. And I helped to create an embodied carbon research matrix where I looked at how other cities around the world are creating policies and programs to address this issue. And also looking at the tools available for measuring embodied carbon and just really collecting all of those documents that are out there to help build our resources around this topic. I also did a similar thing for building deconstruction, where I created another research matrix looking at the different deconstruction policies and programs that are being implemented all throughout the country. And on top of that, I assisted with several green building policy updates. As for some next steps, SF Environment is looking to complete a zero emissions building roadmap, where they are looking at how we can electrify existing buildings within the city, along with making sure that new construction is also all electric. In addition to that, we'll add some operational carbon updates to the climate action plan. And as for embodied carbon, SFE is considering introducing embodied carbon and new building material opportunities into green building policies, both at the municipal level and statewide, and also increase the number of training materials and resources out there for city departments to help increase our outreach about this topic. And in addition to that, including some embodied carbon goals in our climate action plan update. So that is a quick summary of a few of the projects I've been working on this past service year. And I'd love to answer any questions, and feel free to also send me an email if you have any questions you think of later on in the day.
Great, thanks, Tessa. We'll now open it up for questions or comments from our attendees.
Kaylee has a question. Are there any jurisdictions you can point to that are leading the way on embodied carbon and deconstruction strategies?
That is a great question. For deconstruction strategies, I would point to Portland. And as for embodied carbon, it depends on what type of policies you're looking for. We have the Marin Low Carbon Concrete Code here in the Bay Area, which targets embodied carbon within a specific material of concrete. But Vancouver also has a goal to reduce embodied carbon of all new construction projects by 40%, I believe, by 2030. So those would be two good cities to look towards.
Great. One more question coming in. Curious if SF is considering any specific new building climate policies, for example, all electrification.
Actually, San Francisco, I think it was last week that we announced that we are going to have all new construction be all electric. So that is our new goal. And now I think the new challenge is, since we are able to tackle new construction, how are we going to transition away from natural gas in existing buildings? So that's really where the roadmap comes in.
Great. Any more questions or comments for Tessa? All right. Thanks so much, Tessa. Next,
Thank
we
you.
have Shannon Casey.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm Shannon. I am serving with RecycleMore in West Contra, Costa in the Bay Area. So my project has mostly been focused on general waste reduction, anything having to do with avoiding putting more materials in the landfill. I've been doing various projects throughout the year, anything that comes up. I've been helping with, we have a lot of different waste projects, from household hazardous waste to recycling, compost. But the project I wanted to focus on today was our school organics program. This is something that's not new this year, but has been a more recent project for RecycleMore. So our team goes out to these schools. We partner with the waste hauler, Republic Services in the area, to set up organics collection at the schools. So we partner with the school district, and we have a meeting with the principal of the schools. We do have a lot of schools in the area, and we only have so much staff and resources to implement this program. So we've been doing this on a first come, first served basis. So we started with principals and schools that were most interested. So far we have completed about 6 schools. We plan to do more, but because of the shelter in place, that our project has been kind of halted at the moment, but we plan to continue this project. So we go out to these schools and we have a meeting with the principal to see how we can implement it, how it can be set up, and we usually have, well, there's an example in the photo there of how we set up a school. It varies by school because everyone has a different layout. So some schools eat outside, some are inside, but try to set it up so that there's all 3 containers for recycling, landfill, and compost. And there's typically a share bin. So students go down the line, they follow the arrows, and they separate it by material. And typically before we have them do this, the principal or my site supervisor gives a short presentation teaching students where to put all of their waste and how to sort it, which can be very complicated because even myself, sometimes I don't know where to put my material. So it's important to give them that overview first. And sometimes we're dealing with really young children, sometimes as young as about 5 or 6. So they don't fully understand everything. So we're also teaching the staff how to help the students and teaching them themselves where to put things. So we have them go down the line, separate it. And that's typically how we set it up for the first day. And we typically, RecycleMore staff, which is usually myself and my site supervisor, come back the next day to reinforce the practice, because the first day can be quite overwhelming when you have sometimes 400 plus students to deal with. It's usually separated by lunch periods. So we'll have about 100 to 150 students at each, for each lunch period. So that kind of cuts down the overwhelming, trying to get everyone to participate and pay attention, because it's hard to get a lot of rowdy kids to focus on where to put their trash when before they would just dump and run. So the principals have also tried to collect students into a green team. Sometimes there's a reward for them to participate, or just interested students, because we do have some very passionate little kids that are really excited about composting. So it's nice to have them help out, and we teach them first, and then they can also teach their fellow students where to put everything, which is very encouraging. But the main driver for this project is overall just trying to reduce materials in the landfill so that there's less methane, which causes climate change. As for state laws, we have AB 1826, mandatory organics recycling. So every school in our district falls under that requirement. Everyone should be, all schools in the district should be participating in this program by now, but because we have so many schools and such limited resources, we're slowly working to that goal. But SB 1383 is another upcoming law that will also be requiring this along with food recovery. So we're trying our best to implement as many programs as we possibly can. So far we have engaged about 3,000 students my service year, and we have another school that was in progress as the shelter in place started. So I will be continuing my service year next year with RecycleMore, so we're hoping to get that project going at the start of the service year and just go strong, hopefully, if schools are back in session. And our end goal is to provide organic collection to all schools in the district. So yeah, if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Great, thanks, Shannon. We'll now open it up for questions or comments for our attendees.
Question from Linda, curious which schools or which cities, was it primarily one school district or one city? And then what role did the city play in ensuring their overall city waste goals are being met?
So my project is, RecycleMore is the jurisdiction for West Contra Costa County. So that includes Hercules, Pinole, Richmond, San Pablo, and El Cerrito. We don't work directly with the city for this project. We don't have as much data on how much is collected, how much waste is collected, but we're trying to be able to get more of that data now, as we're waiting on a waste tracker software to be able to get more information out to those who are interested. Yeah, thank you.
Another question coming in from Becky. Do you have plans to create online waste sorting curriculum for this upcoming school year? We
don't at the moment, but that is a great idea. As a lot of things are moving online, I think it would be very helpful to have some online learning material for them.
Another question from Nasreen. Has there been any pushback in trying to get the schools to participate?
Definitely. I think the biggest problem with that would be funding, because these mandates are unfunded. So it's there's been a lot of budget cuts for the school district. So that's been a main concern with and a big barrier for us to implementing these projects. So that's why we've only done a few schools, is because it is an increased cost for them typically. So we're trying to make it so that it doesn't cost them as much and we can still implement at least one school a month. That's been our goal.
Question from Nicole. She's wondering if you have any favorite tip to teach students or staff.
My favorite tip is to try to come up with a waste sorting game, because we're dealing with most of the schools that we've done are elementary schools, so it's hard to keep them engaged. So you kind of have to keep it light and fun, or else they'll lose their interest. So trying to make a game out of it is the best tip that I have.
Great. Any final questions or comments for Shannon?
Question coming in the chat. Do you know of other school districts doing similar projects or initiatives?
I do, yeah. There's in Alameda County, which is the county right below Contra Costa. I believe they have this implemented at most, if not all of their schools. So when I implemented my program here, I looked at their program to see what would work at our schools too. Theirs is a little bit more developed because they've been doing it longer, but I'm hoping next year I can take some more tips from how they do their projects and implement those.
Great, thanks, Shannon. Next up, we have Karina Takemoto. Hi, Karina, you might be on mute. Are folks able to hear okay? Or is it just on my end?
Nope, I got nothing.
I think she's grabbing headphones. She'll just be a moment.
Okay, no problem. Hang tight, folks. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to come back to Karina just in the interest of time. Helen, are you able to go?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my name's Helen Wagner-Maggitti. I've been serving for the past year with the city of Carpinteria, assisting with the implementation of their Strategic Energy Plan, or SEP. One piece of the project was researching and presenting on possible funding opportunities and methods for SEP implementation. To give a little bit of background, there are a number of goals laid out in the SEP that require funding that can't be entirely provided by the city's general fund. Goals such as community solar projects and other distributed energy resources, as well as just more generally to increase the resiliency and reliability of our energy system. The city of Carpinteria is in a very vulnerable location within the larger electrical grid and has experienced extended power outages that can be quite stressful and harmful to the local community. The city hopes to move away from relying on polluting backup generators and towards a resilient local grid with increased renewable energy and battery storage. So obviously achieving these goals will require a lot of funding. Because Carpinteria is such a small agency, there is a very limited budget. But one of the sort of unique and cool things about funding energy projects is there are a lot of creative and innovative funding and financing methods being developed. Energy efficiency projects can result in immediate savings on your energy bills, and the payback periods for renewable energy projects are continuing to decrease. And on top of those, many utilities offer incentives and rebates for energy efficiency and renewable projects. So when I started my project and this research, there was a particular interest in revolving funds, which basically redirect any savings, incentives, and rebates back into the fund to then be reinvested in more energy projects. There are a number of cities across the country, including quite a few in California, that have developed revolving energy funds. However, they do prove more challenging for small agencies. Most cities use an internal revolving fund model, which basically means that the fund only goes towards internal municipal projects. But in order to get an internal fund up and running, you need a lot of potential energy projects to work with. So for small agencies like the city of Carpinteria, this can be pretty difficult. There just aren't that many city-owned buildings to really work with and potential projects to work with. So one possible way to get around this is by using an external revolving fund model, allowing for investment in energy projects outside of municipal projects. This model is more often used in the private sector, and investments are frequently in the form of a loan, although it could be offered with other financing mechanisms as well. Some key components to consider before starting a revolving fund include seed funding. So where is the initial money for projects going to come from? Project criteria. So what projects qualify to be paid for by the fund, the selection and approval process, who decides on what projects are funded and why, the payback period, are you looking for quick payback projects, longer term, a combination? There needs to be some sort of fund manager who's going to be in charge of like keeping everything on track. And then a growth timeline and long-term goals, which kind of relates back to the payback period, but you want to consider how fast you can and or want to grow your fund and how to achieve that, as well as any long-term impact metrics. Some quick critical questions to also consider before starting a fund are: what type of projects are you hoping to fund? How big are these projects? How much funding will they need? How many potential projects do you have? What is the likely payback period for those projects? Are you only looking at municipal projects? And then I always like to ask the question of how equity is being incorporated and considered. So it's important to really think about who could and should be impacted by this funding and how. This basically just gave like a very quick overview of some of the funding research I did. Other funding options are also being considered by the city. I gave a full funding presentation to our city council utilities subcommittee back in the beginning of March. And while there haven't been any concrete decisions made yet, especially since there have been sort of more urgent issues in the past few months, I still hope that my research will help inform their energy funding decisions moving forward. Yeah, so thank you for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Helen. Sorry, I just wanted to open up for questions and comments for Helen.
There's a question in the chat. Could you give an example of where equity is being incorporated into a revolving fund?
That is a great question. I don't have like a specific like city example of, but I guess just like if you're thinking about what, when you I guess especially with an external revolving fund, if you're investing in projects within the community that are not like just like a municipal building, you can be investing in projects that are benefiting those like frontline low-income communities that are being most impacted by like energy insecurity as well.
Great. Looks like there's a lot of kudos coming in for you, Helen. Any more questions for Helen? All right, thanks, Helen. Next up, we have Trinity Smyth.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. So my name is Trinity Smyth, and I had the privilege of serving with the City of Sacramento within the Department of Public Works Sustainability Team. One of the main projects that I worked on was developing a energy benchmarking process for the City of Sacramento. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'll give some basic background information, explain the goal of the project, and then I'll go into detail on the process and some of the key lessons we learned. So with the development of the city's 2030 general plan and the 2035 general plan update, as well as the cap for internal operations, the city developed and adopted several goals for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, as well as a energy efficiency goal for municipal facilities. After adopting these plans, the city was able to implement several energy efficiency projects. However, due to limited funding and staff time and availability of resources, staff realized that it would be more beneficial to really prioritize and identify key projects in order to maximize savings and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and achieve their goals for energy efficiency. So the goal of this project was to develop a energy benchmarking process that would increase the city staff's capacity to prioritize and communicate the need for energy efficiency projects in order to achieve the 2035 general plan goal to reduce energy consumption at municipal facilities by 25% below the 2005 baseline level by 2030. So when I was onboarded, initially I took in staff's input through interviews and kind of gained an understanding of what the challenge is and current environment was. I used the city's energy database, which stores electricity and natural gas billing information, and I also researched best practices for municipal energy benchmarking. With these inputs and knowledge, I was then able to develop the city's energy benchmarking report, municipal energy benchmarking report. I was also able to develop Excel-based tools, which will allow the city to update the report on an annual basis. I developed a guide to go along with the tools, and finally a series of slide decks to use and further aid in communicating out the findings from the report to other city staff. And again, these deliverables were all made with the hopes that it would increase city staff's ability to communicate and prioritize energy efficiency projects in order to be better equipped to achieve the goal to reduce energy consumption at municipal facilities. Next slide, please. So just going a little bit more into the process. So we used a very iterative approach in continuously engaging key internal stakeholders through informational interviews to again see what the key challenges were, as well as the need for the city in order to tailor the benchmarking report to their true needs, so it's actually useful. Then I again looked at energy cap data and was able to develop some sample graphs. Again, we took this back to the key internal stakeholders for their review and feedback. That allowed us to finalize and select the best graphs, as well as develop the Excel-based tool. From the interviews, I was able to incorporate a narrative and develop a draft report. Again, brought this back to the key internal stakeholders for their feedback. And right now we're in the process of finalizing the report and will hopefully soon, or at least in the coming months, begin to share the report and the findings with other departments. And next slide, please. So some of the key lessons learned. One of the things that I think is the most important is that that I learned, and I think the city learned as well, is that it is possible to develop an energy benchmarking process within your current systems, something that's simple and streamlined, and even just using a program that is like as universal as Excel. And while your data might not be of the highest validity, by working across divisions, you can really work to improve the validity and identify some of the challenges in order to make the data more reliable and useful, not only for future iterations of benchmarking reports, but for other planning as well. And finally, the energy benchmarking report has already proven to be an amazing communication tool just in these initial sharing and feedback sessions. It's created, it's allowed for a lot of amazing discussion and information sharing, and has allowed it's revealed the complexity of energy use at municipal buildings and the operations, and it's really helped a wider range of city staff to understand that complexity and the true need for these energy efficiency projects. And within the reports, through the whole process, we were able to develop a list of kind of key buildings or actions for each department. So I really think that the report will help to kind of gain buy-in and support for these projects, so the city will be better equipped to reduce energy consumption at their facilities. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Trinity. Yeah, for folks, do you all have any questions or comments for Trinity?
Cindy asks, can any of the resources you developed be shared publicly?
So we haven't yet officially finalized the report, but once it's finalized, it will be the municipal energy benchmarking report will be shared publicly. And I will say, sorry, just if you are interested in like the actual process within the report, there, the appendices include kind of some of the limitations and a description of the process as well.
Jennifer asks, what surprised you most about the data and the process?
Definitely just the complexity and kind of the history of each building and how different they can each be given their history and operations, and which departments are situated within them, and it can really impact their energy use.
Great questions. Any final questions or comments for Trinity?
One question coming in from the chat. Can you elaborate on the disconnect between significant energy savings and cost over time for the city?
And cost savings, is that?
Cost increases. So,
yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, sure. So it kind of boils down to the utilities providers are, so for the city, it's Smyth and PG&E for electricity and natural gas. And of course, as climate change, as wildfires increase, we all know that is increasing the costs for maintaining kind of the whole electricity system. I can't think of the right words right now. So it's increasing their operational costs, and of course then that increases the consumer's cost as well. And so even though the city did implement several energy efficiency projects which reduced their energy use because of these continuous increases in costs, it doesn't equal out. At least for the city of Sacramento, it hasn't balanced out. I will say, even we factored in inflation just to see if maybe that was the main thing that was causing the difference from 2005 to 2019. But even with inflation, there was actually a reduction in cost, but it didn't equal out to the reduction in energy use.
Awesome job. Thanks, Trinity. We're going to turn it back over to Karina Takemoto.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Wonderful. So sorry about that, everyone. Thank you for your patience and everything. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for attending. I really enjoyed hearing all the presentations before and really appreciate this platform for showcasing the awesome work that all the fellows have been doing. I'm Karina Takemoto, and I served as the CivicSpark Climate Fellow with the City of Goleta. My project title this year was Strategic Energy Plan Implementation and Climate Collaborative Support. Very similar to Helen. Shout out to Helen on her awesome presentation. But today I'll be speaking specifically about enhanced visibility as a sustainability-minded agency. So a little bit of background. The City of Goleta incorporated in 2002 and has since demonstrated a commitment to sustainability through various projects and partnerships. The core of my project scope was originally based around the city's 2017 decision of a 100% renewable energy goal by 2030, and the recent adoption of the Strategic Energy Plan, which was to be used as an outline to achieve this goal. They also notably achieved a 3-star community rating and continue to maintain participation in several groups and partnerships such as the Regional Climate Collaborative, Clean Energy Working Group, Monterey Bay Community Power, South County Energy Efficiency Partnership, Green Business Program, and Green Cities California, just to name a couple. As you can probably tell, regional collaboration is super important to Goleta. So in order to recognize the city of all its sustainability accomplishments, a large focus of my service has been on projects that enhance visibility of Goleta as a sustainability-minded agency. And this took several different forms over the course of the year, which you can see under the strategy section on the left. And just to shake things up a bit, I'm gonna start from the bottom on number 6 and go up. So in December of 2019, the City of Goleta joined Monterey Bay Community Power, a not-for-profit agency established by local communities to source carbon-free electricity. And the picture on the right is of me, the Mayor Pro Tempore, the Mayor, the Sustainability Coordinator, and the Planning Director at the Goleta swearing-in ceremony in Monterey. A fun fact is I face planted on my bike the night before, which you can see if you zoom into this photo. But anyway, Monterey Bay Community Power is a community choice aggregator, which allows the community to determine what type of energy mix serves its needs and gives customers the opportunity to be a part of the effort to put more clean energy on the grid and less greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. MBCP offers 100% renewable and 100% carbon-free options to all of its ratepayers, and Goleta residents will be enrolled sometime in 2021. But this is a huge leap in reaching our 100% renewable energy goals. Additionally, regional collaboration has been a defining part of Goleta and its neighboring jurisdictions. Goleta is a member of the Santa Barbara County Regional Climate Collaborative, which seeks to be a network of public agencies, nonprofit and for-profit entities, and community-based organizations in Santa Barbara County. The Climate Collaborative is valuable because it allows the county to work together on regional scale climate solutions, addressing local impacts and resiliency through strong partnerships. Providing consistent community outreach through Goleta's public engagement channels was one of the goals outlined at the start of my service year. And one strategy I used was creating and editing web pages for the sustainability division on the city's website. So I started out with a couple of old pages that were a bit outdated, and began updating and finding links to programs that Goleta residents could utilize, such as free compost bins, styrofoam recycling, and energy and water saving incentives. And then I tried to create a one-stop shop format so it would be easy for residents to find relevant information, and went on to design different pages for things like energy, water, waste, transportation, green building, and the green business program. And additionally, aligning with this goal, I began writing for the Monarch Press, which is the city's monthly online newsletter. Some of the more fun topics I wrote about were how to make Everyday Earth Day, some eco-friendly crafts, the waste hierarchy, and creating a vertical garden. This was a really fun ongoing project because I had the opportunity to write about topics that interest me while also elevating sustainability to the Goleta community. And then two of the larger efforts, so numbers 1 and 2, have been the Lead for City certification and the Beacon Award for Sustainability Best Practices. And both of these projects were largely based on researching, collecting, and inputting data on current and past environmental projects that the city has embarked on. LEAD specifically, the framework provided by LEAD for cities credibly tracks progress toward overall sustainability objectives and has been a huge data-driven effort that I plan on continuing to work on into my next service year. Upon completion, we hope to use this information to not only highlight the great work that the city has done, but also guide us in creating a sustainability plan to fill in whatever gaps may be missing. And then finally, we have the Beacon Award for Sustainability Best Practices, which is administered by the Institute for Local Governments and provides a framework for local governments to share best practices that create healthier, more vibrant, and sustainable communities. And the program honors voluntary efforts by local governments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, save energy, and adopt policies that promote sustainability. My job was to find 3 projects that the city has completed that qualify in each of these 10 categories. And the categories covered things from like green building to promoting community action to waste reduction. And this was a great opportunity for me to get to know everything the city has done in the many sectors that are under the umbrella of sustainability. And I'm proud to say that I actually officially sent out the submission yesterday for Goleta to be awarded platinum for the Beacon Award for Sustainability Best Practices. That was awesome. But yeah, so in conclusion, I just want to thank Cindy, who's my site supervisor, Kaylee, my regional coordinator, and give a shout out to all the Central Coast Fellows that had made this such a wonderful experience. I've enjoyed it so much, and I'm proud to say that I will be returning for a second year to serve with the city of Goleta again. I also recognize that I am very privileged to be in this position as part of such an amazing program and to have my voice heard by all of you on this platform. And next year, I really want to focus on engaging the underrepresented community members in Goleta and ensure their voices are elevated in the planning process and in achieving our sustainability goals. Yeah, so I can open up for questions and comments by anyone. And thank you for all the loved ones that showed up too.
Awesome, thanks, Karina. Let's yeah, open it up for a few questions and comments.
Question in the chat, wondering if you have thoughts on which strategies are the most effective as motivators for the city and for whom?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like the Beacon Award and Lead for Cities are really good motivators because everybody likes to get an award for sure, and it's kind of competitive. So you can look at like what other cities are doing, which gives inspiration for your city to do more. But I think the like best strategy is really getting community members involved, as we've seen with like a lot of these social movements going on lately. Like when the community really comes together and says that they want something, then the government leaders act. So I guess that would be the best driver.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Next year, will you also be applying for the Beacon Award, or is that not a yearly, I guess, award process?
Yeah, for sure. No, good question. So we applied in 2016 for the Gold Award, and we achieved that. But this year we're applying for Platinum, which is actually the highest level. So once we achieve that, we can't do it anymore unless they make a new level just for Goleta because we're so awesome.
Oh, okay. So once you receive the award, it spans, I guess, your entire. I guess. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. You get like that platinum star, and that's on you forever.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Another question in the chat. What are the goals Goleta wants to focus on next year?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. We will be focusing on the Lead for Cities things, and we do hope that that can assist in the creation of a sustainability plan. But another big focus, we recently got an OES grant from the Office of Emergency Services, and we want to use this to work on an energy assurance plan. So I do think that'll be like a big part of next year.
Great, good questions. Any final questions or comments for Karina? Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Karina. Next, we'll turn it over to Amanda Cobb.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for attending my presentation. I appreciate it. And good job to all of the fellows who have gone previously. So as Tim said, my name is Amanda, and I have been working with the San Jose Environmental Services Department, specifically on their Climate Smart team, which is our climate action plan. So San Jose adopted its Climate Smart plan in 2018, and it commits to reaching the Paris Climate Agreement reduction goals. Locally, this equates to about a 6.5% annual reduction by 2050. So in San Jose, buildings make up a huge percentage of our emissions, and with the knowledge that most of the buildings that will exist in 2050 have already been built, tackling current building stock is really key. The city already has approximately 40 million square feet of commercial office space built, so it's definitely a really important sector to focus on. And two of the projects that I've been working on this year have been directly tackling this. Those two are the Building Performance Ordinance and then the Building Performance Leaders Program. So I am first going to go into the Building Performance Ordinance. This was one of my main projects all year, and especially because our deadline for complying was July 1st, over the last couple of months, it's been a major focus for me. So the Building Performance Ordinance builds upon California AB 802, which requires buildings over 50,000 square feet to benchmark their energy usage using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is it's a platform created by the EPA to help buildings benchmark their data. We're one of 6 California cities that has a local version of this. Generally, it's cities that are like changing the threshold, specifically in San Jose. The ordinance lowers the 50,000 square feet threshold that's required by California to 20,000. And then we also require buildings to benchmark their water data, and then in the future, this is a really exciting part, we're also going to require low performing buildings to take actions to improve their energy efficiency. So really getting in on that, changing the existing building stock. So this ordinance aims to help building owners track their energy usage, and then with that, encourage efforts to lower operational costs and improve their efficiency. It can also help buyers and tenants make more informed decisions about the buildings they occupy or buy, and then also can guide policymakers both at the local level and beyond in directing resources to the right place, for example, with directed resources like rebates and incentives. So the program is in the 2nd year of implementation. We phased in the buildings by square footage. So this year it was actually the first time that buildings from 20,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet were required to report. In total, we had about 2,400 buildings that were required to comply. And on the back end, a lot of the work that we did involved like QCing data, for example. It was really surprising for me to find out that it's like very difficult to get data on buildings in cities. We don't really know that much about like how many buildings there are, what the square footage of these buildings are, for example. We used tax assessor data as like our baseline and had to comb through a lot of it to create like our initial covered building list. But even after a lot of work, we had a ton of buildings reach out and explain that, for example, their building was 8,000 feet, not 20,000, or that they actually hadn't owned the building in years. And sometimes like it was a vacant plot of land that we thought was an actual building. So it definitely wasn't a perfect system, but it's something that over time will get easier as we make corrections to our data. And also because this was the first reporting year for so many buildings, the implementation required a lot of outreach and assistance. So this looked like sending out mailers to buildings, creating how-to guides, hosting multiple webinars, and then also heavily relying on Zoom screen share to go through any roadblocks that people were facing. And I found that providing support was one of the trickier parts of implementation, like striking that balance between providing the one-on-one assistance and making sure that people understood the ordinance, but also not putting ourselves way over capacity was pretty difficult, especially because initially we set a precedent that we would give really direct one-on-one assistance. So as the reporting deadline grew closer, we definitely had to take a step back on that and reevaluate. I think this is also something that over time will improve though as building owners become more accustomed to the process. And then as we better understand what resources do and don't resonate with people. So in addition to the BPO, we also worked on the Building Performance Leaders program. So this was more focused on a smaller cohort. We required or expected these groups to commit to reducing their emissions by 10% over the course of the year. And we recruited individuals with a proven dedication to sustainability, as well as a few muni buildings such as City Hall. And what we did for this program, we hosted a lot of webinars, and there were a lot of networking opportunities between these sustainability leaders. While it's still in progress and has also definitely been impacted by like changing budgets because of COVID, the program still aims to create local examples of improving building efficiency to then encourage the broader community to make similar changes. Yeah, I really appreciated being a part of these two programs, especially because they had such different approaches to tackling the same goal of improving our current building stock. And I also really enjoyed that both of them really emphasized direct contact with building owners, and having that individual conversation with people about their buildings was a really great way for me to understand the realities of making changes, as well as like how our program and cities can assist building owners in getting there. And just as a fun ending tidbit of what I experienced, one of my favorite moments that I think really emphasized that is I was helping a woman who didn't realize that she'd been paying for a water meter that hasn't been in use for years. And so she immediately got it fixed, and in the long run, that's going to save her a lot of money. So I'm really happy that I've been a part of this program to help people in the city. And with that, I will take any questions.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Any questions or comments for Amanda?
Question in the chat, what sort of software tools are you using on the staff side to maintain your updated list of covered buildings?
Yeah, that has been a pretty complicated process. So we this year have used a quite variety of different platforms. There's one called Seed, which was developed by UC Berkeley Lawrence Lab, I believe. And that takes data that we've used on, or that we've received from Energy Star, and then you can upload it and do QCing to make sure that people are submitting full reports to us. We, on the side of like customer service, it was mostly just using Excel. We had a shared document between myself and the other woman who was also doing more customer service. But in the future, we're hoping to, we have an RFP out to make sure that we can get a software that kind of combines all of these different things, because it was a lot of like, we have this like general Excel spreadsheet, and then we had like a spreadsheet for finance, and we had a spreadsheet for all of these different things. And so in the coming years, we're hoping to combine those together.
Another question in the chat, is there a strategy in place to track emissions reductions as a result of the implementation of this program?
Yeah, I think because of COVID and just like the changes in the usage of energy in different buildings, that's kind of been put on pause, unfortunately. The second part of the ordinance, which I mentioned really briefly about requiring buildings to update their buildings if they don't reach a certain threshold, initially was supposed to start in 2 years. And so we're in the process of creating that implementation plan, but I think it's going to be pushed back a little bit farther just due to changing budgets. But yeah, the goal of it is to track the changes and direct resources where changes aren't being made.
Great. Any final questions or comments for Amanda? All right, thanks, Amanda. Next, we'll turn it over to Becky Haworth.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. I was a fellow in the Bay Area at the City of San Pablo in the Environmental Services Division. And for anyone who doesn't know, San Pablo is a super small city. It's about 2.5 square miles and completely surrounded by the city of Richmond. But despite its small size, San Pablo has a pretty large and well-documented problem with trash in its creeks, which originates from on-street litter blown into the waterways, trash dumped illegally into or near waterways, and trash left by homeless residents who camp in or near the waterways. So a big part of my project this year was kind of innovation in waste and water quality and authoring what's called a direct discharge trash control plan, which is a requirement of the Regional Water Quality Control Board in order to document what the city plans to do in order to tackle these issues and meet their waste reduction goals. So you can see some of the images on my slide. The kind of leftmost one in the top is a bunch of mattresses and things that were dumped outside a apartment complex. This is a pretty big problem in San Pablo because it has a really high renter population and a lot of resident turnover. And then the left or the right corner is some trash that was just dumped over a bridge straight into the creek bed. So obviously this is a big problem in San Pablo, and the city manager saw that as well. And kind of at the same time as I was starting to write this direct discharge plan, the city manager put together a litter and illegal dumping task force with staff from the Public Works Department, so environmental services and maintenance divisions, staff from community services, and staff from the police department. So I was lucky enough to be involved in this task force and develop a very holistic approach to dealing with this issue. San Pablo already has a lot of programs in place for free waste disposal. So one of the big strategies we developed was an outreach and education campaign that was going to just try and teach people the right thing to do and try and encourage pride in the community so that people are less likely to litter and dump things legally, and that they'll want to try and keep their community clean. Another big thing we talked about or kind of developed was installing new infrastructure. So increased fencing along the creeks, more trash cans and more places to try and encourage people to do the right thing, along with enforcement and then maintenance of that infrastructure to continue to teach people how to do the right thing and enforce when necessary. And then the final part of this approach was some new ordinances, which would expand upon what San Pablo already has in place and also try and create some funding mechanisms for the new programs that we developed. So the approach developed by the task force kind of became the meat and potatoes of my direct discharge plan, and that I successfully submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board at the end of January. And then in February, I was lucky enough to be asked to help the illegal dumping task force present to the city council on the strategy that we developed. So there's a little photo of me presenting to city council. I got to present on the background of the issue, which was really cool because I did a lot of research into that. And the city council had nothing but good things to say, and they allocated funds to implement the litter and illegal dumping program that I had helped develop, which was very cool. Unfortunately, because of COVID and different funding issues and things, that the timeline of the implementation is kind of TBD, but I've been able to see a couple of the things that we developed go into action recently, which has been really cool. Yeah, and so I learned a lot with the city of San Pablo, a lot about how cities work, and I'm really excited to next month start working at CalRecycle and continue my work in waste and water quality as a part of their sharps and pharmaceuticals unit. So I can take any questions now. Thank you all for listening and for being here.
Great, thanks, Becky. Yeah, we'll open it up for a few questions and comments for Becky.
Question in the chat, one moment. Does the plan include any coordination between homelessness programs and waste reduction to try to engage around waste while doing outreach to a vulnerable population? Seems like a way to connect on two fronts.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the city of San Pablo doesn't receive any funding for health and homeless services. They rely entirely on the county for these programs, and there's no homeless shelters in San Pablo. So the city hires a county, they're called the core team. It's coordinated outreach, referral, and something else. But it's this team that goes and does outreach to the homeless community and gives them trash bags and provides them, lets them know the services that are available to them. So the city does that, but unfortunately, other than just advocating for more programs and more money to support the programs in West Contra Costa County, which San Pablo is in, there isn't really much else that the city can do for outreach to the homeless residents.
And another question, did you notice any decrease in trash in the creeks or illegal dumping by the end of the service year?
I don't think so. I actually, on Monday, did a creek walk. So walked in the creek bed and just noted all of the trash. And San Pablo is kind of unique in that the homeless often live in the creek, which is kind of unique. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience, very humbling to see the residents living in the creek and all the trash and things that get accumulated there. And it made me excited about the implementation of this program, and hopefully that will, help fix this issue, and hopefully in the state budget there'll be more money for homeless services, because that's where a lot of it, I think the solution needs to come from the state in a lot of places.
Great, thank you for those responses, Becky. Any final questions or comments for Becky? Great, thanks, Becky. We're now going to turn it over to Laima, Diaz, Vepstas.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Thank you for being here and for sticking around. My name is Laima, and I am currently finishing up my service year with the City of Novato Sustainability Program, which is part of the city's public work department. And as part of my project, and based on the frameworks of the city's climate action plan and general plan, I have been collaborating in sort of a comprehensive municipal sustainability project that includes benchmarking city buildings and the development of internal sustainability policies. And the main goal through this initiative is to work towards a more sustainable organization by reducing resource usage and costs, and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So for the benchmarking piece of the project, back in the fall, I had set up EPA's Energy Star portfolio manager software tool in order to track gas, electricity, and water usage and costs, as well as greenhouse gas emissions and green power from all the facilities that the city owns and operates, which has allowed for the compiling of data on energy and water consumption and costs for city buildings in one location, resulting in a more efficient tracking and measurement of city resources, which eventually and hopefully will save staff time and accelerate data analysis. This tool will also be useful for identifying the most resource-intensive buildings and also setting resource efficiency goals for the city and tracking improvements. And although none of the buildings that are being currently benchmarked are expected to comply with Assembly Bill 802, which as Amanda mentioned in her previous presentation, it's a statewide law that requires some building owners to complete their energy use reporting. If the city ever owns a building that falls under the requirements of this bill, it will be already a step ahead, since the bill calls specifically for the use of portfolio manager to disclose building energy use. And then in regards to the policies, I have been drafting and collaborating in the development of a set of sustainability policies addressing energy efficiency and conservation, water efficiency and conservation, waste reduction and recycling, which we were first named it zero waste. We changed the title. We're still following the zero waste principles, and a fleet purchasing policy that prioritizes low and zero emission vehicles for the fleet, as well as in the update of the use of vehicles policy by including language addressing efficient driving and idling, and all of this to institutionalize practices that help mitigate the climate impacts of city operations, and hopefully will also align, and to align the city's day-to-day operations with the goals outlined in the city's climate action plan and the general plan, which include reducing building energy use and the use of potable water in municipal facilities, as well as increasing the use of alternative fuel vehicles in the fleet. And while the policies have yet to be implemented, we're hoping that they will help ensure the city is moving towards its climate goals, and also setting an example to the community and becoming a more resilient and sustainable organization. As for next steps, we're now in the process of creating a online site for current and future staff that will include access to the municipal sustainability policies, as well as resources and tools regarding the city's climate goals, and also best practices regarding sustainability in the office, etc., in the hopes of raising awareness among staff about the importance of reducing emissions and conserving natural resources, and increasing staff understanding of the city's resource usage and cost trends as well, and ensuring that sustainability initiatives continue to be implemented within the organization and beyond. And I know that was short and sweet. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you also to all CivicSpark staff and fellows, and Paco and Ashoka, and also my supervisor Gretchen, who's also listening in, who's been incredibly supportive. And I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laima. Any questions or comments for Laima?
Question coming in from Kif, wondering about varied engagement in sustainability across these departments. Did you find some departments are more or less engaged in these goals, and how did that affect the policy development?
Yeah, great question. It's, since we are in the Public Works department, most of the engagement has been within the Public Works, and it has made it easier, the fact that we're in this department, since we're working on internal sustainability initiatives, and Public Works is in charge of, anything from irrigation to facilities, etc. So, but we are hoping in the future to engage other departments as well. That's going to be the next step once the policies are implemented, to engage the rest of the organization, all the other departments, so everybody is on the same page, and we can make sure that we continue to implement the goals of the policies.
Any final questions or comments? Great, and thanks for that nice note, Gretchen, in the chat. Thank you, Laima, for your presentation. And last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra Cortez. Give me one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, we are up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to listen to our capstone poster presentation. It's been really great to hear all the engagement and also the encouragement. My name is Cassandra Cortez, and I'm a CivicSpark Fellow for the City of Culver City, working on the Ballona Creek Revitalization Project. My co-fellows, Sunny Zhao, and I have two beneficiaries, Community Development and Public Works. And Sunny will actually be talking about our work with community development on July 22nd for the Clean and Accessible Mobility session, if anyone is interested in tuning into that. However, today I'll be talking about our work that we did with Public Works on researching the polystyrene ordinance amendment. So to start off, I'll go ahead and provide some background information for everyone. In May of 2017, Culver City passed their original polystyrene ordinance that banned the distribution and sale of polystyrene food serviceware within city boundaries. And that original ordinance was really catalyzed by Ballona Creek Renaissance, which is a local nonprofit who approached city leaders after witnessing the amount of polystyrene litter within Ballona Creek to initiate this ordinance. So again, in March 2019, Ballona Creek Renaissance approached city leaders to amend the polystyrene ordinance to include several single-use plastics. So where Sunny and I came in is we were assisting city staff to research amending the ordinance to include banning plastic and bioplastic beverage straws, stirrers, and utensils, whether it's for on-site dining, to-go, or delivery. Requiring disposables made of non-plastic materials, such as bamboo and sugarcane, and only be provided by customer request. Banning meat, fish, egg, and produce polystyrene trays within grocery stores. Banning off-the-shelf polystyrene products, including cups, utensils, dishware, and to-go containers. Banning single-use plastic beverage bottles. And lastly, mandating reusables for dine-in customers. And however, due to COVID-19, the proposed ordinance and research has yet to be presented to City Council for consideration. So we divided our research into two buckets, if you will. The first one being our fiscal research. And broadly, we wanted to understand the financial impacts to residents and businesses of banning certain plastic items and requiring non-plastic alternatives. So to do this, we visited local grocery stores to understand, as a Culver City resident, what is the availability and price of plastic items and non-plastic items. And then to understand prices and availability of businesses, we conducted online wholesale market research to again understand the availability and price from a business perspective. And then lastly, we distributed an online survey to solicit feedback from businesses to understand the financial impact that they perceive. And then our second bucket is our environmental research. And we wanted to understand the environmental benefits and impacts of strong plastic regulations. So to do this, we researched existing life cycle studies to understand the life cycle impact of certain products and reusables. We reached out to local nonprofits who had data on litter within Ballona Creek. We wanted to understand what is being littered, how much of it, and where. And then lastly, we created an inventory of jurisdictions with single-use plastic ordinance to understand what type of ordinances were out there. And as I mentioned earlier, due to COVID-19, the ordinance and research hasn't been presented. I think given the pandemic, there's still a lot of work to be done that will need to be seen after our fellowship. But I'm very thankful to CivicSpark and the City of Culver City for this opportunity It was a great year of continuing learning and really finding what I'm interested in. And with that, I conclude my presentation. And if anyone has any questions now, I'd be happy to take them.
Great, awesome, Cassandra. Any questions or comments for Cassandra? I have a question. Yeah, just how was your experience just communicating and connecting with different businesses in Culver, and how was the reception?
It was a pretty mixed bag. Some businesses were open to taking on more financial burden, to using more sustainable products, and then some businesses weren't that open to it. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we didn't really get to visit as much businesses as we wanted to, since in-person interactions have obviously been limited.
Great. Any final questions or comments for Cassandra?
Looks like there's a question in the chat. Are there specific business types who this is more of a financial concern for than others?
Yeah, definitely. I would say if this was implemented, the burden would be more on restaurants, since it is more mandating reusables, requiring certain types of materials. The city started looking into maybe city grants for any restaurants with financial burdens. So that was a possible implementation strategy. But again, with COVID, I think everything kind of needs to be re-examined to see how this would impact businesses further.
Great, thanks, Cassandra. So this concludes today's poster symposium on energy and waste. Thank you everyone for tuning in virtually to this session. We actually have 7 more sessions. One is actually tomorrow at 1 p.m. It's called Troubled Waters, Rethinking Our Limited Resource. So we hope to see many of you during these other capstone presentations. Please feel free to visit our website to learn more about these additional sessions. We'll post that link in the chat. And on our website there, you also are able to find our fellows and connect with them to follow up with them about their work. A couple more notes here as we wrap up. Recordings of these sessions will certainly be available on our website, and they will also be available with a follow-up email that we'll send to all of our attendees during the last week of July, which is coming up real quick here. And lastly, you see it on my screen, but please also consider attending our CivicSpark graduation ceremony on the 30th to commemorate our fellows, the year as a whole, and hear from some of our some keynote speakers who are going to be sharing just some reflections on this 2019-2020 service year. And just lastly, congrats to all our fellows here for your fantastic presentations and incredible work. Thank you very much.
Thank you for facilitating, Tim.
Yep, feel free to keep the kudos in the chat box and the emojis. Very good. All right. Everyone have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.